Today, we get a first demo of Tanium's new OT capabilities for manufacturing. Welcome back to Tanium Tech Talks. We are your hosts, Alex Miller.
And Ashley McGlone.
Recently on the show, you saw Tanium's endpoint expansion effort come to life as we brought in mobile device data from Intune, including iPhones, iPads, Androids, and Chromebooks.
Well, today we're continuing that exciting new momentum with OT devices. That's operational technology, the stuff used in industrial, manufacturing environments, things like that. And these endpoints don't have an agent. How does that work?
That's exactly what I was wondering, Ashley. Here to tell us about it for the first time on this show is Aaron. Welcome, Aaron. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Aaron Sipe. I'm on the product management team here at Tanium, focused on endpoint expansion, specifically around OT and IoT devices.
Tanium has always run on Windows and Linux machines on the industrial shop floor. That's always been Tanium, Windows, Mac, and Linux, right? But now, wow, this is the day so many customers have been waiting for. Coverage across all devices in the industrial stack. Tanium now has visibility into entirely new classes of devices. So, Aaron, welcome to the show. What exactly is the problem that we're trying to solve?
Yeah, when we're talking about these shop floors and these manufacturing plants, there's a lot of devices there. There are Windows and Linux workstations and servers, but then there's also OT devices, things you can't put a Tanium client on or any client. And we're still trying to understand and give visibility to those devices, those programmable logic controllers or those HMIs or those, heavy, fast moving pieces of equipment. We need to understand, and our customers need to understand, what do they have in their environment so they can understand and protect what they have.
Yeah, that's a really different world. I remember back in the day, I used to work at Toyota, and I was an IT guy, what they called in the carpet and the concrete. Right, I lived in the carpet world, and every now and then I go in the concrete world. And I remember somebody showing me this thing called the 11th finger, which was like this wooden dowel rod where, like, literally you don't put your finger in the machine. You use the dowel rod. Like, this is just a completely different environment of operating than what we're used to in IT.
Yeah, this is very different. These devices are moving fast. They might be controlling things that are very hot. There's a lot of pressure, and then also very critical, right? If you're not able to produce your goods, you have some serious issues, and that can have rippling effects across other companies, other areas within your own organization. But then at the end of the day, to all of us too, availability of goods and utilities are critical.
Aaron, that's pretty darn cool. So my background is in more cybersecurity, and we had to, when we were talking about securing ICS and SCADA devices and things like that, it was always started going over my head really quickly. So what kind of data can we get back from these devices using this feature?
The data we're trying to get back from these devices is we're trying to understand that make, model, firmware, and serial number. That helps these customers understand and build out that asset inventory, but then we can take that information and better understand what vulnerabilities those devices might have, because they still have vulnerabilities and they have firmware that might need to be updated. And these customers need to understand what process they might need to use to upgrade that firmware and secure these devices.
Yeah, over the years, I've had a couple different customers, and when I was serving our customers on a daily basis, a couple of them, I said, well, can you give me a list of what's on the shop floor? And they're like, hey, I got a spreadsheet from 5 years ago, and that's classically what Tanium has tried to solve, is those inventory problems. So, what are we seeing with? I know we've got some customers who are doing this already. Are we getting what kind of feedback are we getting from them?
Yeah, I think the value here is really that speed of visibility, right? As you mentioned, Ashley, there's Windows and Linux machines that are in these environments, and Tanium has been securing those for a long time. And there's a lot of value we are providing today in helping understand and secure those assets within these environments. But then just being able to take that same Tanium client and allow it to help discover those OT devices and bring that data into Tanium is really powerful. It helps them better understand devices that they may or may not know that they had, or better understand, what might be added to the environment, because they don't always know. We, with the benefit of having locations all over the world that can be managed centrally, you don't always have the visibility into what the operators are doing at the end of the day. So being able to get that real-time, rapid visibility into these devices using the same Tanium client that they've been using already really helps them to get the better picture of these environments.
I know we have a lot of global manufacturing customers who this is going to be perfect for. They've been asking for this for years anyway. Could you speak to just a minute? Industrial controls is a much broader category than just manufacturing. Could you talk about our strategy there for a minute?
Yeah, there's a lot of different areas we could talk about when we're saying OT or ICS. We can talk about utilities, whether that's electrical or water. We can talk about oil and gas, or, there's a bunch of different areas here. Initially, we are targeting manufacturing. There's other verticals that we do plan to support. We will be adding more protocols to our supported list. But today we are supporting Ethernet IP and Profinet that really do have broad use within the manufacturing space, especially when we're talking Rockwell, Allen Bradley, and Siemens devices, as well as many, many other vendors within the space.
The number of vendors in this space, you think about going from traditional, Windows, Mac, and Linux endpoint support to, you know, myriad hundreds of different vendors in this space. I'm only going to guess that from a product management standpoint, we're kind of going with the majority and kind of working our way down that list to service as many people as we can as fast as we can.
We're really trying to understand and target those heavy hitters, what has the most coverage that we can provide that visibility to our customers, and then continuing to work with our customers to understand what other devices do they have, how best can we support them and provide them that visibility that they're looking for.
Aaron, that's awesome. As I mentioned, cybersecurity background, I'm super excited to see what this vulnerability and compliance data looks like. I also have a few other questions about integrations or what we can do with the data and reporting. But I believe you brought a demonstration with you today. Would you like to show that off?
Yeah, I'd love to be able to show, the data that we get, but also how quickly you can take an existing Tanium client and tell it, hey, I need you to find OT devices. It's really quick, and I really want to highlight that. This might look familiar to folks watching this, but what I want to highlight is we do have a new shared service called operational technology. And what this will allow you to do is take a Tanium client and add it as an OT satellite. And what that allows it to do is to speak these native protocols, just like these OT devices are familiar with because of the vendor software that's interacting with them. And you can enable that client to discover OT devices using this protocol. So I mentioned Ethernet IP and Profinet. I can select one or both of those protocols. Maybe I know I'm just a Rockwell shop and I have a lot of Rockwell, Allen Bradley devices and I only want to enable Ethernet IP. I can do just one protocol or I can do both. And as we continue to add more protocols, you'll be in full control of what you are using within these environments.
I noticed that was under shared services. Is that the same type of satellite technology that we utilize for Discover that a lot of our viewers might be familiar with?
Yeah, it's the same workflow. So if you have a Tanium client that's already promoted as a satellite, it can then be promoted as an OT satellite. Exact same workflow that you're familiar with today.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, we want to make it as simple and intuitive as you can and familiar, because if you're using Discover to find other devices in your IT network, you probably want to do a similar approach with your OT devices, but in an OT-centric method.
That's a good point. We should probably clarify for folks because I've been around Tanium a few years, and early days, Discover kind of in some environments had a bad rap for not good experiences in those OT environments. Could you talk to how we are making sure that we're respecting devices and not knocking them offline? I know that's a foremost question for a lot of people.
Yeah, the way that we're discovering these devices is we're using the vendor native protocols and we're using the protocols that you tell the client to use. We're not going through and scanning through and attempting to connect on ports, 1 through 10,000 and trying all the different mechanisms to get that visibility. What we're trying to do is use the protocols in the way that they're expected, the same way that vendor software will, and telling the devices, hey, tell me about yourself. And they're responding and giving us that data. We're not going through and trying to, interrogate them repeatedly and try every different way to get visibility, because we know that these devices can be sensitive to that. So we want to introduce the behavior that they expect so that we can get the data that we need.
Kind of translate that into layman's terms. So we talked about Windows and Linux line side in the manufacturing environment. Those machines often have vendor specific software that knows how to talk to those vendors' devices. All we're doing is using the same protocols, the same conversations, just without that special vendor software. So that endpoint can now act as a satellite and bring that data in. Is that a good kind of summary there?
Absolutely. You nailed it.
I personally really appreciate that because I'm a big fan of my heating and air conditioning. So thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't want to introduce any unexpected behaviors. So now I've got my satellite enabled. I've got the OT lab in North Carolina. I want to see what OT devices I'm able to see within that environment. So I'm just going to ask the question, just like I have always done in Tanium. Just want to ask, what devices do I have? I can filter by location, and I want to see what has been found at the NC office. And here I'm able to get, as I mentioned, that make, model, firmware, and the serial number. This is from a device that doesn't have the Tanium client running. This is using the Tanium client to find these devices and bring this data in without having a client running on this Rockwell PLC.
All right, so I got a couple questions here. OT provider location, is that a string that we define when we set up the satellite?
Yep, I can back up and go over that in the configuration.
Because that's important. Because what we're looking at here is a lot of manufacturing environments are really kind of locked down into silos per plant, per geography. But
Yeah.
what we're doing now is you'll be able to get this visibility globally in an instant.
So if I wanted to take a Tanium client that I already have deployed and allow it to be an OT satellite, I can add the satellite configuration. I can name the satellite and I can give it a location. So if I have the Bellevue lab and the Bellevue office, I can set the name and the location of this satellite. I could choose the Tanium client that I want to be the OT satellite. I can choose the protocols that it's using. I can choose both Ethernet IP and Profinet, or I can choose one, depending on what I know may or may not be at that location. And then I can set the schedule at which we are discovering those OT devices.
All right, before you hit save there, I gotta go back up to the location for a second.
Yeah,
And just a real world tip here, and I know everybody that's listening is going to get this right away. So in your location codes, you've probably already got site codes that you use for like BR for Brazil, for example, right? BR dash, city name dash plant dash, floor, shop, section, whatever, right? So these location codes can really give you rich intelligence about the location of these devices when you're looking at a global report.
absolutely. And users can define these as they need and as it makes sense within their environment. They can have these locations defined, and we're going to see them when I ask this next question, and they'll be able to filter based on these fields. So now I've got my satellite configured. It's discovering OT devices. I want to see what it's found. So I'm going to ask for that computer name, that manufacturer, model, operating system, which will give me the firmware, the computer serial number, and then the provider name and location that we just defined. I can sort by provider location and see my OT lab NC office. I'm able to see these OT devices. So I've got a few Rockwell devices, I've got some Siemens devices, and I can see that, the make, model, firmware, serial number. And now, as I mentioned, the OT satellite and OT lab NC office, these are ways that you can better filter and understand what's being discovered in each of your different locations or sub locations within the plant floor.
Aaron, I really appreciate all the data we're already getting back quickly. As a lot of our viewers know, we can take a lot of this data very, very quickly and put it into certain reports and things like that. The first thing that came to my head was that you're showing firmware here. I know I mentioned my kind of brief fascination with vulnerability and compliance data. If I'm able to very quickly see these OT devices and their respective firmwares, that's a really quick hit on determining what things might be vulnerable to, certain attacks and things like that. I know you're going to show us a little bit more about vulnerability and compliance with regards to OT. Would you mind pivoting to that?
Absolutely. So with this data, we are able to map this data and understand what vulnerabilities do these devices have. So I can come over here into comply and look at the overview, and let's just see what critical findings do I have. I just want to know about all the different devices in my environment and what's critical.
Oh, this is actually fantastic. I didn't realize this was an integration with Comply.
Absolutely. This flows straight into comply. And now I can see, hey, I have this Ubuntu operating system with a vulnerability, but I also have this OT vulnerability here. So then I can look in, just like everything else in comply. I can see, hey, this is for a Rockwell device. So this is a OT vulnerability that we're seeing using the Tanium client, pulling in, identifying the device, getting us that data, and now we're able to show you what vulnerabilities you have for your OT devices.
So if you get the CISA bulletins in your inbox, in your email, you see these things come through all the time, CVEs for industrial control systems. And now we've got them matched up to this data we're pulling back. That's amazing.
That's absolutely fantastic. I have a harder one for you now, Aaron, if you're ready for it. So I can see this vulnerability data. That's fantastic. I can see compliance data. That's fantastic. What if I want to fix something? Is there any way for us to take control or take action against any of these OT devices?
So we're not going to take action against the OT devices themselves. But what we do allow is you can take this data, send it to your ServiceNow instance or CMDB, and integrate it with your existing workflows. The other thing we allow you to do using the Tanium client is you are allowed to remote into a device and take control and use that vendor software to mitigate that vulnerability, upgrade that firmware, or work with your third party vendor that might be managing these devices and allow them to use that session using the Tanium client to manage and upgrade that firmware.
So what you're saying is this goes beyond just the new device type data. Think about all the people that got TeamViewer out there that's a 10-year-old version and full of, vulnerabilities. Now you can get rid of all that. And we had a previous episode on RMM, remote management tools. You can look at that dashboard and see with that visibility in your OT environments, what's out of date that way. And then just use the Tanium ScreenMeet experience with that integration to then remote into those machines and then reach out without having to go find those machines on the plant floor. That's going to save some time.
Absolutely. And you know this device can interact with it. It's found the devices. You can use that software to help manage and mitigate those vulnerabilities.
So a lot of these older industrial, ICS SCADA systems are network segmented for specific reasons, right? Security, just making sure they don't fail, things like that. Can you talk to us a little bit about how Tenium either interrogates that data or is a way to operate in that segmented environment?
Absolutely. Just like the Tanium client can operate within segmented networks today, and as long as it has a route in to understand and get that visibility and a way out to get it to the platform, this data flows in the exact same way that all the other Tanium data does. So as long as the Tanium client can get in and get the visibility to those OT devices don't need to have a route out to the Tanium platform. The Tanium client can get its way out and get the data to the platform.
Probably a good follow on to that for our audiences. Compliance often informs that network segmentation. And so now you've got Tanium able to bring that real time visibility to these devices that you can peek into those segmented networks by putting a Tanium client in there and opening a port, right? So that gives you the ability then to report on those things, which helps satisfy those compliance requirements, giving you automated reporting that previously could have been a manual effort.
Yeah, and you say manual effort very casually, but that could mean for some people, right? That could mean a 30, 40-minute commute down the road or something like that. That can save a lot of time.
Yeah, the way this scales is this really allows you to get visibility into all of your different segmented networks. Anything that might be isolated, if you have the Tanium client and it has a way out, you're able to instantly get that visibility to all the different devices within that environment.
That's awesome. But we already talked about how this makes people's lives easier, things like that. Let's talk a little bit about reporting. It's one of my favorite things Tanium does, right? We've always been so good at compiling data that w back in the day would take me hours to collect. So regarding this OT technology, our new feature here, can you show me what kind of that reporting might look like?
Because this data just flows into Tanium, the great thing is you're able to generate those reports for specifically those OT devices, or you can see all of the data side by side to really understand what your threat landscape looks like. Because it's not just understanding my OT devices or my Windows endpoints. It's understanding holistically what Windows endpoints do I have? What OT devices can they reach? Because you need to be able to secure from both sides and understand, if this Windows host is compromised, what can it impact within my environments? So if I just look at the basic inventory report and I want to understand, what Siemens devices do I have, I can quickly look and filter and see, hey, these are the Siemens devices, these are the firmware versions, the model number, and the number that I have. So if I'm trying to understand a new vulnerability is released, Ashley mentioned these advisories that come out. So if a new advisory comes out and I want to understand what does my posture look like for this, this reporting allows you to see that at a scale across all of your environments because you're using the Tanium platform and you're getting the speed and the confidence of that data.
That's fantastic because that's one of the things that I think of, right? Say I get a new bulletin, a new advisory, I can very quickly narrow it down within Tanium within what, less than a minute to determine, hey, I have this OT device, it's made by Siemens, it's this model number, therefore I know it's affected if it has this firmware on it. And I can figure that out in seconds.
Absolutely. It's a lot easier to do that and ask that question or look at that report than it is to try to consolidate many Excel sheets that may or may not be updated in the last several months.
So, Aaron, as with any product release, we've usually got some early adopters, private preview folks. I'm really curious to hear what your customer experiences have been with folks who had early access to try this.
Yeah, absolutely. So this has been in private preview for some time now. And what our customers have been really appreciating is the familiarity with these workflows. As we talked about, this is very similar to the other satellite configurations and being able to ask these questions and get this visibility side by side. But how quickly they're able to get this data. Once it's been configured and enabled, it's as quick as refreshing the screen and seeing those OT devices. So seeing things that they'd never seen before at all, now popping up in Tanium after just enabling an OT satellite has been really powerful.
And I can only imagine. I remember back in the day with the Discover module, customers would light it up and they'd all of a sudden discover devices they didn't know were there. I'm guessing some customers have had some similar experiences here because these are a lot harder to find.
Absolutely. There's been situations where there was a number of devices we expected to find, and there was a number that was greater than that we found, which really shows that the visibility here and understanding what assets do I have can be a really complicated question to answer.
So, Aaron, I'm looking at the clock. We've got a few minutes left here, and I'm just thinking from the customer side, like, wow. So we've got some great stories coming in, and we just think, okay, for years, Tanium was in the Purdue model that a lot of people reference here in this space. Tanium's been confined to the top half of that stack, but now we got the bottom half of the stack for full stack visibility in these industrial environments. And like we said earlier, manufacturing. I mean, we're talking cars, trucks. We've got pharmacy, we've got food processors, we got all kinds of big companies that fit into that. People that manufacture silicon, you name it. All kinds of manufacturing customers here. In addition, you said that's going to be growing, more protocols being added. So, as typical folks, we're just getting started in this space. You've seen what we did with endpoint expansion, like Alex mentioned in the intro, with Intune and those devices coming in. Now we've got manufacturing and industrial devices coming in. So continue to watch this space. It's only going to get bigger and better. It was great to see you at Converge, Aaron. I know this was huge here, I guess, last week before, depending on when you're watching the show. Just all the excitement and buzz from people who've been asking for this for years, and it's finally here. So thank you and thank your team for us for all the work that they've put into this. Anything else you want to leave with folks before we wrap up?
Thanks for having me. And it's been really great, talking through this and meeting with customers and showing them this at Converge and better understanding all the different problems and other devices that they're trying to bring in. So it's an exciting journey. This is a great foundation, and I'm really looking forward to how we continue to grow.
Yes, Aaron, you hit the nail on the head. Thank you. Particularly, thank you for making my day so much more exciting. Love hearing about the new tech. For our viewers at home, all the usual links are below, our documents, knowledge-based articles, and more. If you'd like, drop Ashley, Jesh, and I a like on LinkedIn. Feel free to submit your suggestions if there's a topic you'd like to hear about. We really appreciate it.
So this is a new day for autonomous endpoint management, folks. Wow, it's so exciting. And it's not just on the horizon, it's happening now, and you get to be a part of it. So thank you for joining us on today's show. And until next time,
Go Tanium! No, and the tech is just so cool. Like, I mean, I've been here 5 years or whatever like that, and for how far we've come in 5 years is absolutely insane to me.